In recent years, Starbucks has offered its own convenient and seemingly safe way to gain what I would call racial innocence by association. For starters, there are the UCO stores. Only a few of these stores stand in overwhelmingly poor neighborhoods. Most instead hover on the edges of poverty, near universities, or at the heart of gentrifying areas filled with middle-class African Americans and whites. Fitting this model, there are UCO stores in Chicago's Hyde Park, on Capitol Hill in DC, and next to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Not places that represent the same urbanity evoked by The Wire. But Starbucks doesn't call its program with Magic Johnson gentrifying copy opportunities, does it? Consumers who value diversity can go to one of these Starbucks and listen to blues and jazz and feel like they are doing something to make the dream of colorblindness come true. Even better, they dissociate themselves from prejudice and tolerance from companies like Denny's and others. Under this logic, you can't be part of the problem if you hang out with African Americans, or African Americans hang out where you hang out. See, race really does matter here. By doing this, by Starbucks doing what it does, latte drinkers show to others, but really to themselves, that race doesn't matter. They make an important, both private and public, albeit symbolic, commitment to ending prejudice and fostering racial equality. But they do it in a distinctly safe, but not so urban setting. Sybil Lay has a razor-sharp mind, and for 4 years she trained on Starbucks. While majoring in Asian and American Studies at Temple, she worked behind the Starbucks counter serving drip coffee and lattes in Haddonfield, a leafy, largely white South Jersey suburb of Philly. One day as we talked, she asked me rather sheepishly, "Have you noticed," she said, "over the last few years, how Starbucks gotten blacker?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, they now play Jill Scott and the Roots a lot, and then the movie." The movie Sybil was talking about was Akilah and the Bee, Starbucks' first film partnership. This tells the story of a young African-American girl from riot-torn South Central Los Angeles and her quest to reach the National Spelling Bee Finals. Asked about the movie, Ken Lombard, president of Starbucks Entertainment Division, said, "When we saw Akilah and the Bee, we immediately realized it was the perfect choice for our first film selection. The film's inspirational message about a community coming together to support one of its own aligns with Starbucks' values." Note here, race matters, the race doesn't matter dynamic. Starbucks representatives studiously avoided talking about race, even though the film revolved around an African-American character and the realities of life in an underserved, poverty-ridden corner of America, inhabited almost entirely by people of color. In the promotional literature Starbucks sent directly to Sybil's home, the company said it hoped that the story would, quote, "change the world one word at a time," end quote. Well, it flopped at the box office, though it was a big hit with my kids. It did further align Starbucks with African-American audiences in encoded ways with urban people and the creative class desire for a post-racial world. Without interviewing Sybil or reading Eli Anderson's books or Brian Lowry's article, Starbucks, it seems, understands the appeal of diversity in its musical picks, film programming, and staffing, and the desire for some to show they value integration. However much the nation has changed, though, affluent Americans remain concentrated in white suburbs and white sections of cities. Not everyone can or wants to live in a diverse neighborhood, even a gentrifying one. Many, in fact, spend a lot of money to send their kids to top-flight schools in areas that are hardly diverse, certainly not in economic terms, and certainly are insulated from the problems of the inner city. Still, some feel guilty about the disconnect between their professed values of colorblindness and their actual day-to-day lives in somewhat segregated subdivisions, schools with only token integration, and devotion at lily white churches and synagogues. Again, however, many college-educated salesmen, stay-at-home moms, and web designers want to be or appear to be tolerant. But if you live in a monochromatic world, how can you dissociate, as the Harvard Institute fellow Shelby Steele labels this persistent neo-Merdelian white concern, from racism? How can you appear tolerant? You can vote for an African-American presidential candidate, you can eat at a real Vietnamese restaurant, or listen to real African-American music, see an African-American spelling bee movie, or go to a store, a Starbucks, where people of color sip expensive coffee or work in management positions. Once again, diversity carries with it symbolic value to some white customers. In his book, Blink, Malcolm Gladwell talks about instant decision-making. He uses race thinking as an example. He argues, that some whites see African Americans, especially young black men, and in a blink make a slew of negative assumptions. But for some, for those who value tolerance and want to dissociate themselves from prejudice, they blink sometimes in different ways. I'm not sure you can blink in a different way, but they walk into a store and see a few African American Latinos sitting there and feel good about themselves. As a result of its diversity, the place gains value. Just being in a mixed race setting validates the purchaser in his or her personal politics of inclusion, just like a vote for Obama can. So in a sense, Starbucks' proactive diversity policies, which gets minorities in the door, produces an added payoff for the company and its customers. Not only do these moves expand Starbucks' customer base, but the presence of others makes some whites feel more tolerant, more cosmopolitan, and better about themselves. Still, with its fitted filters of relatively upscale locations and high prices, few Starbucks risk, thinking of another Gladwell's creative books, going over the tipping point. Not many stores are in danger of filling up with too many young black men mouthing 50-cent lyrics. Too many, that is, for most whites. So whites can at Starbucks sip coffee in a seemingly integrated setting. But Starbucks rarely gets too integrated. What's more, it's not just that the stores don't attract too many people of color, but that whites and blacks can see each other there without actually having to have coffee together. This might explain, Eli Anderson speculated when we talked, why Starbucks fits so perfectly with the desires of some whites. Whites, he said, just like looking at black people. Even if a white customer doesn't interact with African Americans around them at Starbucks, they will still reward themselves with tolerance points, Anderson maintained, for just being near people of color. For some, even this limited contact is not available, so Starbucks offers, if someone wants to use the company narratives in this way, a more vicarious kind of association. You can buy its products that bring good coffee, decent jobs, and national change to the inner city and the world's poorest regions. Just by consuming the coffee sold by the company that advertises that it treats all people regardless of race decently, you get a small tolerance dividend and a dose of innocence. If the product you buy puts stores in underserved neighborhoods and hires people of color, then it practices colorblindness, and by implication, so do you. Following along with what Shelby Steele observed, buying from a firm actively engaged in tolerance allows you to dissociate yourself somewhat from the practice of prejudice. You are innocent by association. Again, for many whites, coming of age in the wake of the civil rights revolutions in the 1960s, tolerance has social value. To be seen as sophisticated and tolerant, two highly prized attributes in higher education circles, again according to Richard Florida, is to be seen as valuing diversity and difference. Tolerance then translated into social status and class standing. In the minds of the well-educated, only the ignorant, less educated and less well-informed discriminated against others. This is how Archie Bunker and Don Imus talked and acted. Buying products associated with diversity like Starbucks created a highly valued appearance of good intentions and cosmopolitanism. And gaining that appearance was worth a premium of $4 for every latte. Just a quick postscript. In 1998, Starbucks actually began closing stores around the country as business began to fail. And that summer, the company announced that it was going to close 600 U.S. stores, representing about 8% of its U.S. outlets. Of the stores that were slated for extinction, more than 18% were urban coffee opportunity stores. In the end, Starbucks said very quietly that in reality, it really was all about money. Maybe race didn't matter, but neither did diversity either. Thank you.